Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from the Timberwolves' horrible loss to Portland on Tuesday night. The Wolves came out sloppy, got beat by 14 to an inferior and shorthanded Portland Trail Blazers team in the first game of the NBA Cup. And they have to play the same Blazers team in the same building tonight. We'll break this one down and talk about, are there any real big picture concerns? It's all coming next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. You can start your season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. It is a solemn Wednesday on the heels of another bad Wolves loss, and the Wolves are back in action tonight. So I'm going to start with a little bit more big picture, like where are we right now with this Wolves team? A decidedly different tone than the last couple of days. I'll explain what I mean by that here in a moment. And then we'll get into some of the actual goings on from this game on Tuesday night. And, what obviously needs to happen differently on Wednesday. We'll talk studs and duds. And there were some clear studs and duds in this one for Minnesota. So we'll do all that on the show today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Locked On Wolves newsletter on lockedondaily.com. It's a daily one-stop shop for Ultimate Team and League coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up right now at lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. All right. So the Timberwolves lost on Sunday to Miami without Jimmy Butler in action for the Heat. And it was, they were up 8 with 4 minutes, terrible collapse. Like, I'm not going to rehash it, but my show Monday was like, hey, look, the sky's not falling. This is one game. They should have won it. They're 6-4 with the Pythagorean point differential of 7-3, top 10 offense, top 10 defense. And we broke all that down on Tuesday's show. So Monday was like, hey, this was bad. Here's what was bad. I did a whole segment and a half on how Chris Finch made a ton of mistakes on Sunday and called out Ant and Conley and everybody. And then Tuesday was kind of the flip of, but at the same time, I should say on Monday, I was measured. And I said, look, this is one game of 82. We're 10 games in. And then on Tuesday, I spent pretty much the whole show talking about 2/3 of the show, talking about how, look, this is still a good basketball team and still, to this point, one of the top 10 performing teams in the league, not just like in perception, but in reality. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense, top 10 record, all the above. Now, we're only one day removed from that. I'm not going to go full sky is falling. If they somehow lose to Portland again on Wednesday and, whatever, like that's still on the table here in the next few days. But I am a bit more, I'll say, concerned than I was on Monday's show following the loss to the Heat on Sunday, because they lost in really hideous fashion to Portland on Tuesday. And look, Portland's a bad team. They started like 3-5 and, were better than expected. And then the Wolves beat up on them last week. But this is a Portland team that had no DeAndre Ayton and only got 5 minutes out of their best player in Anthony Simons. He played 5 minutes before leaving with an injury. Jeremy Grant was awesome. Robert Williams III was fantastic off the bench. He was probably the best player on the floor in this game. But this team didn't have Ayton or Simons. And the Wolves were at full strength. And they came out completely disinterested, sloppy. And you could tell from the opening tip, really. Like I made a note in the first half of the first quarter. It's the little things that, every now and again in a basketball game, like you'll have, obviously a bad, somebody dribbles the ball off their foot, throws the ball in the second row, but just normal passes, swinging the ball around the perimeter. Those types of plays looked challenging for the Wolves early in this game. Like things that wouldn't be uncommon to see at a high school game where you make the right pass, but it's off target. So the guy has to, reach for the ball and then like recover it. He doesn't have time to load up and shoot. Stuff that you see like non-pro players make those mistakes, and we take for granted watching professional basketball that these ideally the passes are right in the shooter's pocket, or they're at least on their body. But like, and this wasn't one guy. This was like everybody. The rotations were not crisp defensively. The passes were not crisp or accurate offensively. It was just really sloppy. And it was still a single-digit game toward the end of the first quarter. Portland ends up 11 after the first. But it really snowballed. And I know the Wolves won the second quarter. It was the only quarter that they won until they were trying to make up point differential ground in the NBA Cup late in the fourth quarter in what was really garbage time otherwise. But it just didn't look like they were ready to play. And I'll get into some of the specifics here later. But in terms of a big picture concern, I want to start there because there's no time. Like if I had another day before the next game, I would say this is a tomorrow show thing and let's keep this to the game. But we got to hit it first here because the Wolves are back in action, less than 24 hours after me recording this. So we got to hit it now. I think that my biggest concern right now isn't strictly that they're 6-5 and have lost 2 in a row, right? Because they had won 3 in a row before this, and they easily could have won Sunday. One bad game, the whole thing. My concern is I'm starting this, like if the Wolves were ever to play a 9-man rotation, this was the moment. When you're playing the same team 3 times in 4 games, twice in the same building in 2 nights, from a rest perspective and also from a familiarity perspective, from a throwing different things at them perspective, from a, look, we should be able to beat Portland by playing our 9th, 10th, 11th guys a little bit. Like if Josh Minott and Rob Dillingham are ever going to play rotation minutes, now's kind of the time to do it. I would have thought Tuesday or Wednesday. And now this sounds so silly to say, but you're kind of up against the 8 ball. Your back's against the wall, however you want to say it. Obviously, it's silly to say that in the 12th game of the season, but you don't want to lose back-to-back games to Portland on the road and lose 3 in a row and then have to go into Sacramento for an NBA Cup game on Friday. And the discourse is already so ugly around this team, and a lot of it's fair. It's not a must-win because that gets thrown around too much. It's not. But, like, you really want to win on Wednesday. So if the Wolves had won Tuesday, maybe Chris Finch would have been like, all right, let's play a little Rob Dillingham. Let's get some TJ Shannon, get some Joe Ingles on the floor on Wednesday, right? But like losing in the way they did on Tuesday, now does Chris Finch just want to double down on playing the same 8 guys heavy minutes on Wednesday? He's really painted himself into a corner. And I talked about this, I think I can't remember what day it was. I think it might've been Monday's show, that the thought process for Finch is clearly, let's get these guys as many reps together. And by that, I mean the top 8, let's play these guys together as much as possible because we're introducing Randle and DiVincenzo and we got to make sure these guys gel. And I understand that. And then I'm sure he's thinking like, as the season goes on, we build a nice record and we can kind of filter in some of these other, the Minotts of the world and the Dillinghams. Those are probably the top 2 that you want to get a few minutes here and there and rest some guys on back-to-backs and lighten the minute load. But he wanted to get a rhythm with the top 8. Well, that's backfired because now you're only 6-5 and you just lost to one of the worst teams in the league and you're playing them again 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later. And what's next? Like, I guess you could argue that it's time to shake things up, but Rob Dillingham, I hope, will be fantastic. There's a reason he hasn't played yet because it's likely that still Mike Conley and Dante DiVincenzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are going to give you your best chance to win, playing them as many minutes as possible, at least in the short term. So I do think on Wednesday we may see something a little bit different. It might be more Josh Minott. He played 2 first-half minutes in this game. It might be some Rob Dillingham, although Chris Finch is so measured with this stuff that feels very reactionary, right? But I think the problem is now we're 10% of the way through the season, a little more than that, and no idea what the Wolves have in Rob Dillingham and Josh Minott and TJ Shannon and even Joe Ingles being on the roster. So when do they play? Because like the schedule's not going to get a whole lot easier in the near term. And you can't only play an 8-man rotation for the entirety of the regular season. And I don't ever think that was the plan, to be clear. But it would have been easier, in my mind, to start out with giving some of these guys minutes and then, maybe whittle it back from there. Portland and Sacramento on the road this week. Home for Phoenix on Sunday. That's a tough game. At Toronto, but then you have at Boston. And then you're home for some tough conference opponents. Houston, Sacramento, Clippers, Lakers, all on the homestand. Like, you're playing playoff teams, starting with that Boston game on the 24th, which is a week from this Sunday. I mean, you play playoff teams from November 24th until December 23rd is when you play the Hawks on the road. So basically a month straight of playing teams that will be in the playoffs. Clippers twice, Warriors twice. Like, when does this rotation expand? If not now, if not on a back-to-back, three games in 3 out of 4 games against the same opponent, against a young, undisciplined opponent that's going to turn the ball over on you or give the ball to you. We saw that in the fourth quarter. They tried to give the Wolves the game back, and the Wolves wouldn't take it. Got down to 11 and kept getting pushed back up. We'll talk more about that. But this feels like the perfect opponent to trot out Josh Minott and say, hey, man, go nuts for 16 minutes. Get some stocks. Knock down an open corner three. He's not going to make high-risk plays offensively. He's going to play within himself and play in the system and not turn the ball over a ton like some of these other guys were. So I want to get into a bit of what actually happened in this game. But my biggest question surrounds the rotation. Chris Finch is a great head coach. He really is. Timberwolves have a good roster. It's still a championship caliber roster. And I'm on record. I am on record as not liking the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. I will say that till I'm blue in the face. I said it from day one. I don't like it. I thought they were better with them. I thought their ceiling was higher. That doesn't mean that 11 games in, the sky is falling and this team is not good, and they're not serious, and they're they don't have a chance at getting back to where they were. They're not a top 4 seed. Like, that's all so hyperbolic at this point. And even if I can be against the Cat trade and believe that their ceiling was higher, and also still believe they're better than a 500 team. This is still a 50-win team. We're 11 games in, guys. Like, it's not over. They got to figure some stuff out. Both can be true. All right, I want to get into some of the specifics of this game. We'll talk through some of the overall team issues and then also individual studs and duds, which will be a doozy. We'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I'm going to pull up what the line is now for Wednesday night's Wolves game. The Wolves are 8.5-point favorites at Portland on Tuesday, a line that went up from 6.5 when it first came out. Now, following the loss on Tuesday night, for Wednesday night's game, the Wolves are, and it's not on the board. That is weird. I wonder if that has anything to do with the Ayton and Simons injuries. But Wolves Portland is not on the board currently at FanDuel. But go check that out. I would assume the Wolves will still be favored probably 4.5, 5.5 points. If there's no Simons and no Ayton, probably higher than that, given that they've lost 2 in a row. But go check that out at FanDuel. Check out Thursday Night Football and, of course, a full slate of games on Sunday for the NFL, too. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, so the way this game started for the Wolves, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, it was just sloppy. It was slow. It was uninspiring. It was the opposite of crisp. Like, whatever the opposite of crisp is, it was that. Maybe sloppy. The ball was not snapping around the perimeter. The rotations defensively were slow. And then turnovers were the biggest issue early in this game. In fact, on the game, the Wolves had 4 players with 4 turnovers. Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, and Dante DiVincenzo. Somehow both Conley and Edwards each only had 1 turnover in this game. Randle was the one early that I thought was the biggest culprit, and we'll get into that here in a minute when we talk about some individual performances. But the turnovers early were bad. It was indecisiveness. It was at times indecisiveness. At other times it was trying to force the issue. It was carelessness. There were 3, maybe 4 inbounds plays. The Wolves just straight up messed up and turned the ball over. They threw the ball out of bounds on an inbounds play once. They threw it to Portland a couple of times. Like I mentioned high school basketball earlier. Like that's what this felt like at times. I mean, it was really bad. You would have thought that they didn't have a shoot around, that they didn't have a day in between games, that they were playing, just at a really rough patch in their schedule. And, something that it was just really, really bad. And stuff that, a lot of the stuff we saw in the last half of the fourth quarter on Sunday against Miami, the lack of execution, and nobody was the adult in the room. Nobody righted the ship. At least Mike Conley had 6 assists, 1 turnover in this game, but he didn't play great, and he only played 24 minutes. DiVincenzo was bad, actively bad in this game. Turnovers were a massive problem early, and also perimeter defense. The Wolves did not get up on shooters for Portland early, allowed them to get into rhythms. And I understood the logic behind we can give Scoot a little bit of space. We can get clearly that was part of it, but they just weren't getting out on shooters, and Portland gained confidence. And yeah, they hit some crazy nutso shots. Like Jaden Sharp had a buzzer beater that was crazy. Who hit the other one? Denny Avdia hit one at the end of the third quarter that was nuts. Like these guys were barely looking at the hoop, just chucking it up, and it was going in. Like that's seriously what was happening. But the Wolves allowed them to get into that sort of rhythm and gain that sort of confidence by being very lackadaisical defensively. That's being kind on the perimeter. There were multiple situations that guys just didn't even close out to the touch and were there and could have closed out, but didn't even get a hand up to contest. Julius Randle was the biggest culprit. There was a stretch. It was third quarter. I don't remember who made the fadeaway. Somebody made a fadeaway mid-range on the left side of the floor, and Randle turned and could have contested, and instead turned around to rebound. Didn't contest the shot, didn't box out. Shot was made. I think a simple contest would have made that a lot more difficult. The player was fading away and everything. I think a possession or two later, opposite side of the floor, Randle doesn't even contest a corner three. Completely flat-footed. I'm calling him out because it was a stretch where it was just brutal. He wasn't the only one, though. Very poor. And there were some, the sharp heave at the end of the first quarter, I think, and the Avdia one at the end of the third quarter. Ant was in his jersey on that. It was fine. He made a tough shot. But they allowed them to get into this rhythm. They're still an NBA team with a lot of young talent whose coach called them soft after an embarrassing blowout on Sunday. Chauncey Billups called his team out, which is obviously a risky move as a coach, but it worked. This is a really young team. Jeremy Grant is the only dude that was on the floor in this game with legit Robert Williams with legit long-term NBA experience. Simons is still pretty young. Shaden Sharp is still very young. And it's a bunch of really young guys. But Robert Williams and Jeremy Grant are the only guys that would be in rotations on other teams that would even sniff the play-in or the playoffs this year if they run, other teams in the NBA. And they just wanted it more. They responded to their coach challenging them. The Wolves did not respond to whatever Chris Finch said after the collapse on Sunday. And I know he said they went through it, they watched it all, and then they cut it up and showed the possessions, how bad things were Sunday, the take foul from Ant, the foul on the three-point shooter by Jaden McDaniels, the 3-4 turnovers, how bad things were during the collapse on Sunday. This was a game, basically the full game was exactly like that for the Wolves. I called out turnovers, but you go on down the line. The Wolves turned it over 21 times in this game. They were a -7 on the glass. A -7 on the glass to Portland. They lost points in the paint by only 2, but you can't lose points in the paint to Portland minus DeAndre Ayton. Donovan Clingan only played 21 minutes and only had 4 points. So it wasn't losing on, tip dunks and it was a little bit of it. There were actually a stretch where Robert Williams dunked twice in 5 possessions and then had a couple of lobs that he converted in the second half. Robert Williams was 9 of 10 shooting. I think it was all right at the rim. Rudy did not have a good game. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute, but the paint defense, and it starts with the perimeter defense. It was also bad. The contain was not there, but the Wolves did not have an answer for the lob threat. And you can't lose points in the paint to Portland sans DeAndre Ayton. You just can't do it. So I said they had 21. They actually had 23 turnovers. So 3 more turnovers than Portland, 7 less rebounds, 2 less points in the paint, and 5 less made threes. Portland shot 56.3% on threes. The Wolves were 37.1%. Portland made 18 threes in this game. I believe I saw that 56% for the game was the highest percentage from three that any team in the NBA shot in a single contest this year. I mentioned rebounding. Portland did have 11 offensive rebounds in this game, and that's kind of how they sealed the game in the fourth quarter. Was the Wolves just like, it was like they gave up. They tried zone a couple of times, couldn't rebound out of the zone. The first time they tried the zone, it was an Ant recklessly fouled the three-point shooter. Ant did not. Nobody really played well besides Nas, and Jaden had some good moments, but man, some rough stuff. The Wolves lost the assists category by 8. They shot more free throws. I guess we'll give them that. They shot and made more free throws, but this was just a really disappointing performance against a far inferior opponent that was shorthanded. And now you got to play them again on Wednesday. And in whatever the film session is going to be in the morning, this team has to respond. They just have to. Let's talk about some individual studs and duds next. That's how we'll close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price where you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase the 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, individual studs and duds. It's an easy one. We'll start with the studs. We need a little bit of positivity here. Naz Reid was great. 28 points, 10 of 17 shooting, 4 of 8 outside the arc, 6 boards for Naz Reid, 1 assist, 1 steal, only 1 turnover in a game where, I mean, Josh Minott was the only guy that didn't turn it over, and he only played 2 minutes. So of the 8 guys that played more than 2 minutes, everybody turned it over at least once, and Naz tied for the least with 1 turnover. Active on the drive, like off the catch was great, putting the ball on the floor, getting to the basket, had a couple nice, those floaters that he shoots from basically right in front of the rim. 4 of 8 outside the arc. He knocked out a couple of threes early in the fourth quarter that gave the Wolves a bit of a boost and pulled them to within, I think at the time, 13 or 14. They got to within 11 before ultimately it was like a, steal score for Portland. And suddenly it was a 15, 17 point game again. But Naz was great. Like, he was the best player on the floor for Minnesota, bar none. 28 and 6 for Naz in 34 minutes. He also was third on the team in minutes played in this game too. Jaden McDaniels is the other one. Jaden's been playing a lot better lately. He had 17 points on 8 of 10. He was aggressive. The Blazers were giving him room to operate, and instead of just, letting it fly from 3 when it was somewhat contested, he put the ball on the floor, got to the basket. He was 1 of 3 on threes, and the 2 misses he had were like, they never looked like they were going in. He still doesn't not look comfortable from the perimeter. But if teams close out on him too much, or if they're overloading the other side of the floor, wherever Ant is, Jaden's been putting the ball on the floor. And in this game, he did a good job of getting most of the way to the basket, hit a couple of tough floaters off the glass that teams kind of gave him an angle where he was able to do that. He also had 6 boards in this game, tied for second on the team in rebounds, which was nice to see. 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He did have 4 turnovers, but again, that was hardly unique to Jaden in this game. He played 36 minutes in a game they lost by 14, and Jaden was a +4, which is pretty interesting. I'll say that again. They lost by 14. Jaden played 36 of 48 minutes, and he was a +4, which, we could dive into this to see like who was on the floor when Jaden was off. Like, DiVincenzo was a -20 in 18 minutes. I don't think Jaden and Dante played a whole lot together. So, like, how much of that is Jaden playing well versus Dante playing bad? Certainly a mix, but I thought Jaden McDaniels was very good in this game. I'll go. I really don't want to go a third stud, but like ultimately Anthony Edwards had an okay game. Um, if I went third stud, it would be Ant. He had 26 on 19 shots. He ended up 4 of 10 outside the arc. One was late when it really didn't matter. 6 of 6 at the line. He should have gotten at least 2 more trips to line. I thought the officiating was a bit spotty in this game. Not that ultimately, that's not at all why the Wolves lost, but I thought he should have gotten to line a little bit more. 3 assists, 2 steals in a block, plus just 1 turnover for Ant in 37 minutes. He did not have a single rebound, which is an abomination. Like Anthony Edwards cannot play 37 minutes and not stumble his way into a rebound. Like I'm pretty sure I could run around an NBA floor for 37. Well, I couldn't. I wouldn't be able to run for 37 minutes. I could be present for 37 minutes on an NBA floor and stumble myself into a rebound. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't know, just by like paying attention, and I don't know. And like I'd have to go back and watch specifically what was going on with Ant on these defensive possessions. But like for him to have 0 rebounds is crazy, especially since he's been, I think overall he's been rebounding the ball a lot better lately. He was better last year. Like it's an area he's improved, and maybe that's just not a bad. I mean, it is a bad indicator, but maybe it's a good indicator, as in, it does a good job of indicating his activity level or lack thereof. Again, I didn't feel like he was actively inactive in this game. Like I thought he played okay overall. It's just concerning when you can play 37 minutes at his size and athleticism and not grab a rebound. But overall, I thought he was okay. Duds. Oh, man. Let's start with Julius Randle. I already kind of was pretty blatantly honest about Julius's defensive performance, but offensively, he wasn't much better. He had 4 turnovers in 29 minutes to only 2 assists, 11 points on 9 shots, 0 of 3 outside the arc, 6 rebounds. He did have 3 offensive rebounds, and he only got into double figures because he had what was basically a garbage time dunk near the end. And he got to the line 6 times, so he made 5 of 6 free throws. But 5 fouls and 4 turnovers in 29 minutes. A couple of bad offensive fouls, a couple sloppy defensive fouls. Careless, I would call them. Careless passing for sure. And I thought this was probably Randle's worst game. Not probably. It was Randle's worst game in a Minnesota uniform. I know he wasn't great opening night against the Lakers, but this was worse. Like it just wasn't a good Julius performance. He has to compete defensively. Like, and that was what I heard from Alex Wolf of Locked On Knicks when the Wolves traded for him was like, hey, when he's locked in defensively, he could be okay. But it's not always there. And I think we're seeing that. Julius was not present defensively in this game. The effort level has to be better, which was not often a problem with Karl-Anthony Towns last year. And like on the one hand, I hate to keep comparing the two. On the other hand, I don't, because that's what we're going to do. And, okay, if you want to compare Dante and Julius Randle to Karl-Anthony Towns, let's talk about Dante DiVincenzo's night. For everybody that wanted to see more Dante, and to be fair, I do too. I actually said on the show yesterday, I think it's likely. I think I said this on Twitter too. Like DiVincenzo is going to play more progressively, and he should. He was awful in this game. He played only 18 minutes, barely played in the second half. I don't know that he played in the fourth quarter at all. He just really struggled. 3 points on 3 shots, 1 of 3 outside the arc. All of his shots were from 3. And he didn't make any. He didn't score at all in the second half. 2 steals, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, and 4 turnovers in 18 minutes. Really forcing the issue at times. Not a good performance from Dante. And hey, while we're at it, a third dud. Rudy Gobert, disappointing performance. Yes, he had 9 and 8 and 4 assists. He also forced the issue. Tried to get a bit too cute after he had 1 tough assist early. Ended up with 4 turnovers along with his 4 assists. And like I mentioned, Portland 42 points in the paint for a DeAndre Ayton-less Portland team is not okay. And it starts at the point of attack defense. But Rudy's rim protection was, I'll use the word lackadaisical again. I think that's the best way to describe the paint protection for Rudy and others on the Wolves. And like I'd put, Nas, is somewhat of a culprit there as well, and Julius as well. But I thought Rudy was subpar there. All right. That's enough of this one. Let's do it again tomorrow, but not exactly that. We'll hopefully this looks a lot different on Wednesday. The next show in your feed is going to be the Locked On Sports Minnesota. Let me try that again. Locked On Minnesota Minnesota basketball party will be on the audio feed later on today on Wednesday prior to the game tonight. So check that out. I will not be on the show on Wednesday. I normally am. It will be Reggie Wilson, the sports anchor at KARE 11, the fantastic Jack Borman, who is the co-host of the postgame, the postcast that we do on the Locked On Wolves, the Locked On Wolves postcast. Let me try that again. On the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. And then also Ron Johnson, the Ron Johnson Show, and Sam Ekstrom will be doing the Minnesota basketball party. So that'll be in your feed. You can watch it Wednesday mornings on YouTube live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota channel. I'll be back. This show will publish again Thursday, another post-game pod, hopefully a much more lighthearted, jovial pod. But listen to the postcast from Tuesday with Jack on it, along with Luke Inman. Listen to the basketball party. Listen to me following the next Wolves-Blazers game. Lots of episodes that will populate the Locked On Wolves audio feed here in the next several hours. So be sure to tune in to all of the shows. And then, of course, on Friday, we'll set you up for Wolves Kings Friday night as well. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that you can go to LockedOnDaily.com and sign up for our new daily newsletter to get Ultimate Team and League coverage delivered right to your inbox every single morning. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.